Everybody, so this video is going to be in two parts. We're going to cover these two different conditional quizzes. I'm going to start with the first conditional quiz about doing the leap year and the century thing, and then in the second half we're going to do the other quiz about doing some odd and even stuff or divisibility things, I think, for that. All right, so this one we're asking for input from the user. We're going to take out a value, check to see if it's right or not, and then we're going to do some other stuff in here. So let's get started by taking in some values from the user. All right, pretty straightforward. Just going to take in a value from the user. At this point, we're going to do, basically we're doing a little bit of like a, kind of just making sure the value is in the right spot. I'm going to actually do, I'm going to maybe flip this a little bit. I'm going to say like if the value is between like 1,000 and 2,000, then go ahead. Else, we'll do something else. So I'm going to say something here like number. As long as the number is greater than 1,000 and the number is less than 3,000, do some stuff. Else, we're going to say, it says something like invalid input. So I'll put that down here. And then what I can do in here is I can handle all the rest of the stuff is going to be inside of this if statement. So we're going to have two different things. There's a lot of different ways that we can do this. I might do these in just two separate chunks is probably the easiest. Like this is an if else, and this is also going to be an if else. So if we're down in this block of code, we know that the number is in the correct range. So we're going to say something like, I'm going to make two if else statements. And I might set this up kind of as two blocks. I mean, there's a lot of different ways of doing this. I want to be clear that there are multiple ways that we could go about solving this problem. I'm just going to say something in here. Yeah, I mean, I think we just need to say if number is divisible by 4, which means the remainder is going to be 0, we should say something like system.out the year's a leap year. And then we could say not a leap year for the other option. I'm sure I messed something up in there, like quotations. Year's not a leap year, looks good. And then, so that's one check. If it's divisible by 4, I mean, there's other things I could do in here, but I think just breaking these up into two separate parts is going to be the best option for this. And then I just need to do these other options in here. I need to say number mod 100 is equal to 0. System.out this thing. Delete any of that extra stuff I don't need. And I'll put this in as the other one. This year is a century, quotation, else, quotations. Yeah, so that's pretty much the answer, except for I keep deleting too many quotations. We kind of have like a check first. I think this is like as like a little protective filter. If we get into this block of code, we know for sure the number's in there, and so that just kind of helps contain everything inside there. We can do multiple ifs and else's inside of each other. This is an if else that's nested inside of another if. Totally fine to do. There'll be different ways of doing this as we get more deeper into our coding. There'll be other options that we could choose here, but this is the most straightforward version for this. Again, this is not the only answer for this. There's multiple different ways you could do this. This is just the answer that I think makes the most sense and does this correctly. I'd be remiss if I didn't go through and actually show like just some examples of this code working. I didn't do any kind of, I should have done something where I'm asking for the user for a value. I didn't include that, but we could probably throw in a system out print before or after this line. But I should just at least check to see, okay, let's say if it's 5, we should get invalid input, great. That's all I'm going to get. 100, invalid input, great. We're going to say like 1400 should get leap year, end of century. If I do something like 1405, not a leap year, not a century. I can do negative values in here. Let's just test some weird values. Okay, invalid input. 1 million, invalid input. Okay, so hopefully it's kind of convincing me that I've tested this enough. All right, I'm going to move on into the next problem. The next problem I like a little bit more. It's about doing a similar idea, but just slightly different. We're asking the user for a number, and then we're just going to, see what's going on with that number. See if it's divisible by 2, 3, by both, by neither, anything like that. And it's giving us some outputs that we should do. So I'm going to do this slightly differently. I'm going to do some similar things and some different things in this one. One thing, I do need to still collect a number. So let me go back to my old code and get that. All right, so we've had this, we've taken this input, and then we just need to kind of do these different rules, seeing if the number is divisible by 2, 3, one or the other, or neither. So we're going to do this in a series of if and else statements. So we're going to start out with, I'm just going to check the top line here and see if this thing is true. In order for it to be true, we just need to use some compound conditionals. We'd say if the remainder of num divided by 2 is 0, num mod 2 is 0, and number mod 3 is also 0, then we should say this. We should add on to this a little bit more and say, well, else if, what else do I need to check? If it's divisible by 2 and not by 3, so I could take almost this line of code and I could put this in here. Say num mod 2 is 0 and num mod 3 is not. If you recall, the exclamation mark is saying not 0. Then system out print this thing. I could do that, and that is totally right. However, I should use the power of if else to say, like, I know some information about the number by the time I get to line number 20. I know for sure it can't possibly be divisible by both 2 and 3, because if it was, it would have already got caught up here. So I know some information. I know it's not divisible by both. So what I should do in here, I don't actually need to check both things. I could just delete this and just check to see if it's divisible by 2. If that's the case, then I can do system out print divis 2. I could also in here, I could say num mod 3. By that same kind of logic, I could say something like this. I know for sure it's not divisible by both, so let me just see if it's at least divisible by 3. And if it is, great. And then we could say else, if we get down to this final line of code, else, print the number itself, we could print number. Okay, so for me, that's the most straightforward version of doing this. You could totally put in those compound conditionals, but it is kind of nice to use the power of this kind of block of code to your advantage. And I think really importantly is having this else here at the end, just so I don't have to worry about like, oh, it's not divisible. Like, I don't care. In any other case, if it hasn't met these criteria, one of these criteria, we're just going to print the number. I don't need to worry about it. That helps us get rid of negative values and any of those kind of weird things that might go on. One additional level of sophistication I could add in here, I could actually say, oh, actually, no, this is actually, for this instance, I can't do that. Never mind, so I was going down the wrong path there. So I think this is probably the simplest version of this that we could get. We should, again, test this, as always, with our code to see if it's, like, going to work with some values. 5, it's just printing that value out. Let's see, like, 6, we should get divised by both 2 and 3. We could do, like, 4, divisible by 2. We could say, just check some different numbers, 9. Divisible by 3. Okay. All right, there we go. That's a couple practice conditionals, taking in inputs, using modulo, and then using conditionals.